She literally named her daughter after me, then kicked me out of her wedding photos because my scarring might draw attention. When I asked why, she said, "My wedding planner recommended we look visually cohesive." I just stared at her. That was a year ago. Yesterday, her husband showed up at my door, eyes red, asking for the truth. Imagine my surprise when after my best friend literally named her daughter after me, just to turn around and kick me out of her wedding photos because I'd ruined her aesthetic. Let me take you back to the music festival where everything went down. I still twitch in my sleep thinking about the shots that whizzed and flew over my head. Claire was holding on to me for dear life, but I turned towards the shots so I could protect her. A bullet hit me right in the shoulder and the next grazed my entire cheek. The doctors told me I was lucky, that the bullet barely missed my carotid. It took off a chunk of my ear as well. Claire cried in the hospital, held my hand, told me I was her hero. She called my mom to update her. She sat with me through the first few days. Then it was like she just let go. Her visits got shorter. Then she stopped showing up. I spiraled. I couldn't sleep without meds. My face was lopsided from the swelling. I kept having panic attacks in the shower. People stared at the pharmacy. My body looked wrong. I couldn't recognize my voice. Claire, meanwhile, looked like a blooming rose. She got a pixie cut, started volunteering. She posted about survivor strength. When people asked if she knew me, she said, "I owe her my life." But when I texted her to hang out, she said she was healing differently and needed emotional boundaries. 2 years later, she was engaged. Pastel wedding, beachside, early summer. She asked if I could do a reading during the ceremony. I was surprised, but I said yes. Then I got the real message, a week later. She said her wedding planner recommended the bridal party look visually cohesive and that my scarring might draw attention. Said maybe I could still come, but it would be better if I didn't sit in the front or appear in too many photos. I told her I understood. I didn't. Then a few days before the wedding, she posted a tribute to me, called me her guardian angel, said I couldn't make it because weddings can be emotionally overwhelming. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed the app. The day before her wedding, I recorded a video on my phone, just me, sitting in front of a window. I said everything I needed to say. I said I was happy she survived. I said I wished I hadn't. I said sometimes I still wake up reaching for her hand. I sent it to her sister. I didn't expect her to watch it. Turns out the sister included it in the reception slideshow. They were playing photos of the bachelorette trip when it cut to me, sitting in silence. Then my voice filled the room. Claire stormed out. Later that night, she texted me, "I can't believe you would try to make my wedding about you." I didn't reply. A month later, she sent me a message saying she wanted to name her second daughter after me. Said it was her way of honoring what we went through together. I told her to never contact me again. I can't help but think one day that little girl might grow up and ask where her name came from, and Claire will have to tell her or lie, and either way, she'll remember me. I thought I'd never even hear about her again until the groom showed up at my front door. I stared at him through the peephole, my heart hammering against my ribs. The man on my doorstep looked exhausted. His shoulders slumped in a way that didn't match the confident groom I'd seen in wedding photos. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and guilt etched lines across his face that hadn't been there on his wedding day. He knocked again, softer this time. I watched him run a hand through his disheveled hair before he spoke to my closed door. He introduced himself as David and asked if we could talk. His voice cracked when he mentioned Claire didn't know he was here. He needed to understand what really happened. My hand hesitated on the deadbolt. Every instinct screamed to keep the door closed, to protect myself from whatever fresh pain Claire's world might bring. But something in his tone, the way he emphasized really happened, made me wonder if he was starting to question his wife's version of events. I opened the door. The moment David saw me, I watched the familiar, uncomfortable recognition wash over his face. His eyes traced the scarring along my cheek before he caught himself and looked away. I'd grown used to that reaction from strangers, but seeing it from Claire's husband felt like salt in old wounds. He shifted his weight nervously on my doorstep. I stepped aside and let him in, immediately regretting it as he entered my space, bringing Claire's world with him. David sat on the edge of my couch, his hands clasped tightly together. He told me he'd watched the wedding video multiple times since that night. His voice dropped to almost a whisper when he revealed that Claire's reaction had been more than just embarrassment. She'd had a panic attack that lasted hours, hyperventilating until she vomited, shaking so badly they'd had to call the hotel doctor. I crossed my arms, anger flaring in my chest. Why was he really here? If he wanted me to feel sorry for Claire's wedding night trauma, he'd come to the wrong place. David must have seen the hardness in my expression because he quickly continued. Claire had been having nightmares about the festival shooting ever since the wedding. She called out my name in her sleep, begging me not to leave her, apologizing over and over. The nightmares had gotten so bad she'd started sleeping in their guest room to avoid waking him. My hands clenched into fists. 2 years of silence, and now Claire was having delayed trauma responses? Where was this guilt when she told me I'd ruin her wedding photos? David's next words made my blood run cold. He explained that Claire had been lying to everyone, including him, about the extent of our relationship and what happened at the festival. The way he said it, carefully watching my reaction, told me he'd already started uncovering the truth. I felt my defensive walls rising higher. He was here seeking information to help his wife, not to understand my perspective or offer any kind of apology. Of course, even now, it was still about Claire. David rubbed his face with both hands before revealing what Claire had told him. According to her, we were casual friends who barely knew each other before the shooting. She painted a picture where I'd become obsessed with her after the incident, unable to let go of our trauma bond. The words tasted bitter just hearing them repeated. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table, my hands shaking with rage. If he wanted the truth, I'd show him the truth. I scrolled through years of photos. Claire and me on spring break in college, matching Halloween costumes through the years, birthday parties where we were inseparable. I showed him the photo from when we were 18, grinning at the camera with fresh matching tattoos on our wrists, infinity symbols we designed together. David's face went pale as he swiped through image after image. We documented everything back then. Study sessions that turned into wine nights, road trips where we'd sung until our voices went hoarse, lazy Sundays where we'd claimed opposite ends of my couch and shared popcorn while binge watching shows. He stopped at a graduation photo, Claire's arms wrapped around me from behind, her chin on my shoulder, both of us laughing at something off camera. His finger hovered over the screen as he asked quietly if we were best friends. The disbelief in his voice told me everything about the magnitude of Claire's deception. I demanded to know what Claire had told him about my injuries. David shifted uncomfortably before admitting she'd said I got hurt trying to help, but she'd made it sound like I was injured while fleeing, caught in the crossfire like everyone else. Not that I deliberately turned toward the shooter. Not that I'd used my body as a shield. Not that I'd made a choice that saved her life and destroyed mine. David sat heavily on my couch, putting his head in his hands. His next words came out muffled, but still hit me like a physical blow. Claire had named their daughter after me, and he hadn't even known I existed before the wedding. He'd thought it was a family name from Claire's grandmother. I stared at him, trying to process this new betrayal. Claire had taken my name, given it to her child, and erased me from the story entirely. It was theft of the cruelest kind. David looked up at me with haunted eyes. He asked how Claire had managed to hide an entire friendship from him. As he spoke, details tumbled out. They'd only dated 8 months before getting engaged. Claire had pushed for a quick wedding, saying she needed stability after her trauma. She'd been seeing a therapist who specialized in survivor guilt, or so she told him. The pieces were falling into place, each one more damaging than the last. I asked about Claire's family, the people who'd known me for years. David's expression darkened as he explained that Claire's entire family had been told the same story. To them, I was just someone from the festival who'd become fixated on Claire afterward. Her parents, who'd once called me their second daughter, now believed I was unstable. Her sister, who'd included my video in the slideshow, had been warned about my obsession. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd thought possible. Claire's sister had known the truth and still played along with the lie. She put my video in that slideshow knowing exactly what she was doing, knowing the reaction it would cause. David pulled out his phone, showing me message threads from Claire's family. They'd warned him that I was unstable and might show up at places they frequented. Her mother had sent him articles about trauma-induced fixation. Her father had offered to pay for security if I ever became a real problem. They'd created an entire narrative where I was dangerous, someone to be watched and feared. My legs gave out and I sank into the armchair across from him. All those people who'd once been part of my life had been turned against me with carefully crafted lies. Claire had built a wall of deception so thick that the truth couldn't penetrate it. David revealed that Claire had been attending therapy specifically for dealing with a stalker who blamed her for what happened. She'd weaponized professional help to reinforce her false narrative, using therapeutic language to make her lies sound like healing. The therapist had even written a letter supporting Claire's need for boundaries, which Claire had showed to family and friends as proof of my instability. I asked David why he'd really come here, what had made made him question Claire's version after all this time. He pulled out an old phone from his jacket pocket, Claire's phone from before they'd met. He found it hidden in a shoebox in their closet while looking for their passports. The phone still worked, and it contained years of text conversations between Claire and me. David handed me the phone, and I saw our entire friendship laid out in digital form. Thousands of messages spanning years, inside jokes, late-night conversations about our dreams, support through breakups, and family drama. The last messages were from the hospital, Claire telling me she loved me, that she couldn't have survived without me, that I was the bravest person she knew. I scrolled through the messages with trembling fingers, each one a dagger to the lies Claire had built. David watched my face crumble as I read her words from the hospital bed, promising we'd always be there for each other, that nothing could break our bond. The timestamp showed she'd sent these messages just hours before she started pulling away. David's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Claire's name flashed on the screen. He declined it immediately, but she called again and again. The third time, he answered with visible reluctance. I watched his face change as Claire's voice carried through the speaker, high-pitched and frantic. She discovered he wasn't at work. She knew where he'd gone. Within minutes, we heard a car screech to a halt outside. David jumped to his feet, panic replacing the guilt on his face. Through my window, I saw Claire stepping out of her car, her pixie cut disheveled, her face twisted with rage. She marched toward my door with purpose. The pounding started before David could reach the door. Claire's fists hammered against the wood as she screamed for her husband. I stayed frozen in my chair, watching David's hands shake as he reached for the doorknob. The moment he opened it, Claire pushed past him into my living room. She stopped short when she saw me, her chest heaving. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then her eyes landed on the old phone in my hands. Her face went white. Claire lunged for the phone, but I pulled it away. She stumbled, catching herself on the coffee table. David tried to calm her, but she whirled on him with fury I'd never seen before. She accused him of betraying her, of not understanding what she'd been through. Her voice cracked as she insisted everything she'd done was to protect herself. I stood up slowly, still clutching the phone. Claire's attention snapped back to me. She started talking rapidly, explaining how seeing me brought back the trauma, how my face was a constant reminder of the worst day of her life. She claimed she'd tried to include me but couldn't handle the flashbacks. The lies poured out so smoothly, I almost believed she'd convinced herself they were true. David asked her about the messages, about our friendship. Claire's composure cracked further. She spun a new story on the spot, claiming I'd been possessive, that our friendship had been toxic, that the shooting had given her clarity to escape. She painted herself as a victim, not just of the shooting, but of me. I showed David more photos on my phone. Claire at my college graduation, cheering louder than my own family. The two of us at her parents' anniversary party, arms linked. Her sleeping on my couch during a particularly bad breakup, mascara staining my pillows. Each image made Claire's story unravel further. Claire's breathing became erratic. She clutched her chest, claiming she was having a panic attack. David moved to comfort her, but she pushed him away. She pulled out her phone and started typing frantically. Within seconds, my phone buzzed with notifications. She'd posted on social media about being forced to confront her stalker and feeling unsafe in her own community. The manipulation was breathtaking. Even caught in her lies, she was spinning a new narrative. David looked between us, confusion and horror warring on his face. He asked Claire directly if I'd saved her life at the festival. Claire's hand stilled on her phone. For a heartbeat, I saw the real her, the girl who'd held my hand in the hospital. Then the mask slammed back down. She admitted I'd pushed her down when the shooting started, but claimed lots of people were doing the same thing, that I'd exaggerated my role. She said the bullets that hit me were random, that I hadn't deliberately shielded her. I touched the scar on my cheek, feeling the familiar ridge of damaged tissue. The chunk missing from my ear throbbed with phantom pain. David saw the gesture, and something shifted in his expression. He asked Claire why she'd named their daughter after me if I meant nothing to her. Claire's face contorted. She screamed that I'd manipulated everyone, that I was trying to steal her life. She accused me of sending the video to ruin her wedding, of stalking her family, of being obsessed. The accusations flew faster and wilder, each one more desperate than the last. Her phone rang. Her sister's name appeared on the screen. Claire answered immediately, putting it on speaker. Her sister's voice filled the room, urgent and concerned. She'd seen Claire's posts about confronting me. She was on her way over with their parents. I felt the walls closing in. Soon my home would be invaded by people who'd once loved me, now convinced I was dangerous. Claire saw my fear and smiled, a cold expression I'd never seen on her face before. She told her sister to hurry, that she didn't feel safe. David grabbed Claire's arm, demanding she tell the truth. She jerked away from him, accusing him of taking my side over hers. She threatened to leave him, to take their daughter, to tell everyone he'd chosen a stalker over his own wife. The threats poured out in a torrent of manipulation. I backed away toward my bedroom, needing distance from the chaos. Claire followed, still ranting about my obsession. In my doorway, she stopped, staring at my nightstand. A framed photo sat there, one I couldn't bear to put away. Claire and me at the music festival, hours before everything changed. We were laughing at something, heads thrown back, completely carefree. Claire grabbed the frame and threw it against the wall. Glass shattered across my bedroom floor. The sound snapped something inside me. I pushed past her, grabbing a box from my closet. Inside were years of birthday cards from Claire, ticket stubs from concerts we'd attended, a necklace she'd given me for being her maid of honor at the wedding she'd eventually excluded me from. I dumped the contents on my bed. Claire tried to grab them, claiming they were stolen, that I'd taken them from her house. David watched in stunned silence as she invented a history where every memento was evidence of my supposed obsession rather than our friendship. A car door slammed outside, then another, and another. Through my bedroom window, I saw Claire's family arriving. Her parents, who'd once insisted I call them mom and dad, her sister, who'd been like my own sibling. They walked toward my house like an army, faces set with determination. Claire ran to the front door, flinging it open before they could knock. She fell into her mother's arms, sobbing dramatically about being trapped, about fear, about trauma. Her father's face darkened as he looked past her to where I stood in my hallway. The man who'd taught me to drive, who'd walked me down the aisle at my college graduation when my own father couldn't make it, now looked at me like I was a threat. They pushed into my house without invitation. Claire's mother demanded I stay away from their family. Her father threatened restraining orders. Her sister recorded everything on her phone, building evidence for their narrative. I was surrounded by people who'd once been my second family, now treating me like a criminal in my own home. David tried to interject, to show them the photos, the messages. Claire's family turned on him instantly. They questioned his loyalty, his judgment, his fitness as a father. Claire cried harder, claiming I'd turned her husband against her, that I was trying to destroy her marriage just like I'd tried to destroy her wedding. I retreated to my kitchen, overwhelmed by the onslaught. Claire's sister followed, still recording. She demanded I admit to stalking Claire, to sending the video maliciously, to being obsessed. When I stayed silent, she pushed harder, accusing me of jealousy, of wanting Claire's life, of being unable to accept that our friendship had ended. Through the kitchen window, I saw more cars arriving. Neighbors drawn by the commotion, Claire's friends from her volunteer group, people who'd seen her social media posts and came to support her. My quiet street filled with people who believed I was dangerous. Claire appeared in the kitchen doorway, her family flanking her like bodyguards. She made one final demand. I needed to publicly apologize for stalking her, delete all photos of us together, and promise never to contact her or her family again. In exchange, she wouldn't pursue legal action. I looked at David, still holding Claire's old phone with our messages. He met my eyes, and I saw he knew the truth, but I also saw his fear, the realization of what standing by the truth would cost him, his marriage, his daughter, his entire life built on Claire's lies. Claire's father stepped forward, using his size to intimidate. He gave me 30 seconds to decide. Around us, phones recorded every moment, ready to share whatever happened next with the world. Claire had orchestrated this perfectly, turning my refusal to disappear quietly into a public confrontation that supported her narrative. I thought about the video I'd sent to Claire's sister, how my pain had been twisted into harassment. Every attempt to hold on to the truth of our friendship had been weaponized against me. Now, surrounded by an angry mob in my own home, I faced an impossible choice. Claire's mother started counting down from 30. Her voice echoed through my kitchen, each number a nail in the coffin of the truth. I looked at the faces around me, searching for any hint of the love we'd once shared. I found only suspicion and anger. At 15 seconds, Claire's sister moved closer, her phone inches from my face. She whispered that I could end this peacefully, or they'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. The threat was clear. Submit to their narrative or be destroyed by it. At 10 seconds, David finally spoke. He told Claire they needed to leave, that this had gone too far. Claire turned on him with vicious fury, accusing him of being manipulated, of not supporting her, of choosing a stalker over his family. The crowd murmured support for Claire, shooting dark looks at David. At 5 seconds, I made my choice. But before I could speak, sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police. Claire's face lit up with triumph. She'd won either way. If I agreed to her demands, she'd have my confession. If I refused, the police would find an angry crowd at my house, supporting her stalker narrative. The sirens grew louder. Claire's family closed ranks around her, preparing their story. David stood apart from them, still clutching the phone that held the truth, his face a mask of anguish. The crowd outside grew larger, drawn by the drama and social media updates. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by people who'd rewritten history to erase my sacrifice, my friendship, my very existence from their preferred narrative. The police were moments away. Whatever happened next would define not just this moment, but how my story would be told forever. Claire smiled at me, cold and victorious. She knew she'd won. The truth didn't matter anymore. Only the story everyone would believe, and she'd made sure that story painted me as the villain and her as the victim, forever and always. The siren stopped outside my house. Car doors slammed. Footsteps approached my front door. Claire squeezed out fresh tears, preparing for her performance. Her family surrounded her protectively. The crowd held up their phones, ready to capture whatever came next. I stood alone in my kitchen, the woman who'd saved Claire's life now cast as her tormentor. The police knocked on my door, and I knew that no matter what I said, Claire's story had already won. The truth was just another casualty, like the chunk of my ear left on that festival ground, like the friendship we'd once sworn would last forever. David looked at me one last time before Claire's father ushered him outside to meet the police. In his eyes, I saw recognition, regret, and the terrible weight of knowing the truth but being powerless to speak it. He was trapped in Claire's web just as surely as I was, both of us prisoners of her carefully crafted lies. The police entered my home, and Claire began her performance. Her voice shook as she described feeling threatened, stalked, harassed. She showed them her social media posts, the supportive comments, the concerned messages from friends. She painted a picture of escalating obsession that culminated in today's confrontation. I watched it all unfold with a strange sense of detachment. Every word she spoke moved me further from the truth of who I was, what I'd done, what we'd been to each other. I was being erased in real time, replaced by a fiction that served Claire's need to escape her guilt. The officers took statements from everyone present. Each person corroborated Claire's version, adding details that supported her narrative. By the time they got to me, I'd already been convicted in the court of public opinion. Nothing I could say would outweigh the testimony of a dozen concerned citizens. David tried to show the officers the phone with our old messages, but Claire's father intercepted him. A struggle ensued, and the phone fell, cracking against my kitchen tile. Claire quickly grabbed it, claiming it was hers, that I'd stolen it. The evidence of our friendship disappeared into her pocket, where it would no doubt be destroyed. The officers suggested I might benefit from mental health services, their tone making it clear they saw me as unstable. They recommended I avoid contact with Claire and her family, stopping just short of arresting me. The warning was clear. Any further attempts to tell my truth would be seen as continued harassment. As the police prepared to leave, Claire made one final move. She asked them to document her injuries from the confrontation. She showed them red marks on her wrist where she'd grabbed the table, claiming I'd caused them. The officers dutifully photographed the marks, adding physical evidence to her file of lies. The crowd began dispersing once the police left, satisfied that justice had been served. They'd participated in protecting poor Claire from her delusional stalker. They'd be heroes in the retelling, standing up against harassment and obsession. My reputation in the community was destroyed. Claire's family led her outside, surrounding her like Secret Service agents. At my door, she turned back one last time. The mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw satisfaction in her eyes. She'd successfully rewritten history, erasing my sacrifice and our friendship in one masterful stroke. David lingered behind, torn between following his wife and staying to apologize. Claire's father grabbed his arm, pulling him away, but David resisted long enough to mouth 2 words. I'm sorry. Then he was gone, swept away in the tide of Claire's fiction. I stood in my empty house, surveying the damage, broken glass from the photo frame, scattered mementos of a friendship that officially never existed, the echo of accusations that would follow me forever. Claire had won so completely that even I began to question my own memories. My phone buzzed with notifications. The confrontation had been live streamed, posted, shared, comments poured in condemning me, supporting Claire, analyzing my obsessive behavior. People who'd never met either of us felt qualified to judge, and their verdict was unanimous. I scrolled through the posts, watching my character assassination in real time. Someone had screenshot my face during the confrontation, circling my scars with cruel annotations about karma and justice. The image went viral within hours, becoming a meme about stalkers getting what they deserved. Claire posted a lengthy statement about surviving not 1 but 2 traumas. First the shooting, and then years of stalking. She thanked everyone for their support and urged other victims to speak out. The post garnered thousands of reactions, shares, and comments praising her bravery. I thought about responding, about posting the photos I still had, the evidence of our real history, but I knew it would only feed the narrative of my obsession. Every truth I tried to tell would be twisted into further proof of my instability. Claire had created a perfect trap. My phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. Word had reached her through social media, distorted through multiple retellings. I answered to hear her frightened voice asking what I'd done, why I was stalking some poor girl, whether I needed help. I tried to explain, but the story sounded insane even to me. A best friend who'd erased our entire history, a saved life rewritten as coincidence? It was easier to believe Claire's version, that I'd fixated on a stranger after shared trauma. My own mother doubted me. The calls kept coming. Extended family, old friends, coworkers who'd seen the posts. Each conversation followed the same pattern: concern, confusion, and ultimately suspicion. Claire's narrative had infected everyone I knew, turning them against me with surgical precision. I realized this was only the beginning. The story would follow me everywhere. Job interviews, new relationships, any attempt to rebuild my life would be haunted by Claire's fiction. She'd marked me permanently as dangerous, unstable, obsessed. The scars on my face were nothing compared to the damage she'd done to my reputation. Night fell, and I sat in my dark living room, afraid to turn on lights and draw more attention. Through my windows, I could see neighbors watching my house, probably discussing the day's drama. I'd become the neighborhood cautionary tale, the dangerous woman who'd stalked that poor survivor. My phone battery died, mercifully ending the stream of notifications. In the silence, I touched my scars, remembering the moment I'd chosen to shield Claire. I'd saved her life and destroyed my own, first physically and now socially. She'd survived both the shooting and our friendship, leaving me as collateral damage both times. I thought about David, trapped in a marriage built on lies, raising a daughter named after a woman he'd been taught to fear. He knew the truth, but could never speak it without losing everything. We were both prisoners of Claire's narrative now, bound by the same chains of social pressure and disbelief. Somewhere across town, Claire was probably being comforted by friends and family, praised for her bravery in confronting her stalker. The fiction had become more real than the truth. She'd sleep peacefully, surrounded by support, while I sat alone in the dark, erased from my own story. The real tragedy wasn't the shooting or the scars or even the betrayal. It was that Claire had made me disappear so completely that even I sometimes wondered if our friendship had been real. The gaslighting was so thorough that I questioned my own memories, wondered if maybe I had imagined the depth of our bond. But then I'd touch my scars, feel the damaged tissue where bullets meant for Claire had found me instead. My body held the truth even if no one would believe it. I'd turned toward danger to save her, and she'd turned away from me to save herself from the guilt. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, possible legal action, continued harassment, further social isolation. Claire had built a prison around me made of lies and public opinion. Every move I made to escape would only tighten the bars. She'd created the perfect trap, one that punished me for the crime of saving her life. I finally understood why she'd wanted to name her daughter after me. It wasn't honor or remembrance. It was the final erasure, taking my name and giving it new meaning, one that had nothing to do with who I really was. Her daughter would carry my name into the future, but the story attached to it would be Claire's fiction, not my truth. I sat in my dark living room for hours after everyone left, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The police had believed Claire's version completely. My neighbors now thought I was dangerous. Even my own mother doubted me. I touched the scar tissue on my cheek, feeling the familiar ridges that proved what really happened at that festival. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my door. Through the peephole, I saw a process server. I opened the door and accepted the papers. Claire had filed for a restraining order. The documents painted me as an unstable stalker who'd been harassing her for years. She'd included screenshots of my attempts to reach out after the shooting, reframed as obsessive behavior. I spent the morning searching for a lawyer. Most wouldn't even take my calls once they heard Claire's name. The few who listened quoted fees I couldn't afford. One attorney bluntly told me that fighting the restraining order would only make me look more obsessed. The system was working exactly as Claire had planned. My phone rang constantly. Former friends called to express their disappointment. Coworkers texted asking if the social media posts were true. My boss left a voicemail saying we needed to discuss my situation and its impact on the company's reputation. Each message drove home how thoroughly Claire had destroyed my life. I drove to the bank to access my savings, only to discover several unauthorized withdrawals. Small amounts over months, just under the threshold that would trigger alerts. The teller explained that since they came from a joint account I'd once shared with Claire for our apartment, there was nothing they could do. She'd been stealing from me while planning my destruction. Back home, I found an eviction notice taped to my door. My landlord cited the police visit and safety concerns from other tenants. I had 30 days to leave. Claire's campaign had cost me my home too. I sat on my couch, surrounded by boxes of memories she'd tried to claim were evidence of stalking, and wondered how someone I'd saved could be so cruel. David appeared at my door that evening, looking even more haggard than before. He glanced around nervously before I let him in. He'd brought a flash drive, explaining it contained security footage from their home. His hands shook as he handed it to me. The footage showed Claire practicing her terrified victim act in their bathroom mirror, perfecting the trembling voice and tears. He revealed more disturbing truths. Claire had been visiting lawyers months before their confrontation at my house, asking about restraining orders and defamation suits. She'd researched how to document stalking behavior and coached her family on what to say. The wedding video incident had given her the perfect opportunity to execute a plan she'd been crafting for years. I asked why he was helping me now. David's voice broke as he explained that Claire had started the same pattern with him. She'd accused him of taking my side, begun documenting his suspicious behavior, and threatened to claim he was abusive if he didn't support her completely. He'd realized he was her next victim. We spent hours going through the evidence on his flash drive. Videos of Claire laughing about my scars with her friends, text messages where she'd called me pathetic for still caring about her, photos she'd taken of my social media posts, annotated with notes about how to twist them into evidence of obsession. The depth of her manipulation was staggering. David revealed that Claire's therapist had started questioning her story. Too many details didn't add up. The therapist had suggested couples counseling, which Claire had refused. She'd accused the therapist of being manipulated by me, even though they'd never met. Her lies were beginning to create cracks in her carefully constructed narrative. The next day, I met with a different lawyer David had recommended. She reviewed everything and confirmed what I'd feared. While David's evidence proved Claire was lying, it had been obtained without consent. Using it would open me to charges of conspiracy and invasion of privacy. The legal system offered no path to justice. I returned home to find my car vandalized. Someone had spray painted stalker across the windshield. My tires were slashed. Neighbors watched from their windows, but no one offered help. Claire's narrative had turned my entire community against me. I was completely alone. That night, Claire's sister called from a block number. Her voice was different, uncertain. She admitted she'd always known the truth about our friendship. She'd included my video in the wedding slideshow because she thought Claire needed to face what she'd done, but she couldn't publicly support me without losing her entire family. She revealed something that changed everything. Claire had done this before. In high school, she'd had a best friend who'd supported her through her parents' divorce. When that friend became more popular, Claire had spread rumors about her being obsessed and unstable. The pattern was clear. Claire destroyed anyone who reminded her of her vulnerabilities. I spent the following days packing my life into boxes. Each item held memories Claire had tried to poison. The concert tickets she now claimed I'd forced her to attend. The birthday gifts she'd reframed as love bombing. The photos she'd said were proof of my obsession. My entire history had been weaponized against me. David visited again, this time with news that Claire had escalated. She told their daughter's daycare that he was unstable and shouldn't be allowed to pick up their child. She'd started documenting his erratic behavior and paranoid accusations. He was living my nightmare in real time, watching his life crumble under her lies. We discussed options, but every path led to more destruction. Exposing Claire meant she'd unleash whatever nuclear option she'd prepared. Staying silent meant accepting the false narrative forever. We were both trapped by her willingness to destroy everything rather than face the truth about herself. I found a job in another city, 3 hours away. The background check flagged the restraining order, but the manager was willing to give me a chance. It paid half what I'd made before, but it was something. I signed a lease on a studio apartment, sight unseen. Starting over was my only option. My last week in town, I ran into Claire's mother at the grocery store. She recoiled when she saw me, clutching her purse like I might attack. I wanted to tell her the truth about her daughter, about the pattern of destruction. Instead, I walked away. Some battles couldn't be won. David helped me load the moving truck. He'd filed for divorce, knowing Claire would make him pay for it. She'd already started posting about being abandoned by two abusers who'd found each other. The narrative wrote itself. We were the villains in her story of survival. As we loaded the last box, David handed me an envelope. Inside were printed emails from Claire's high school friend, the one she destroyed years ago. The friend had reached out after seeing Claire's posts about me. Her story matched mine perfectly. Claire's pattern of destroying those who knew her vulnerabilities stretched back decades. I drove away from the town where I'd lived my entire life, watching it disappear in my rearview mirror. Claire had won. She'd erased our friendship, stolen my name for her daughter, and destroyed my life. But I was still breathing, still moving forward. That had to count for something. The highway stretched ahead, leading to a city where no one knew Claire's version of me, where my scars were just scars, not evidence of obsession, where I could build a life without the shadow of her lies. It wasn't justice, but it was survival. 3 months later, I'd settled into my new routine. Small apartment, quiet job, no social media. I'd learned to introduce myself without flinching, to deflect questions about my past. The nightmares had faded. The anger had dulled to a manageable ache. Then David called. Claire had made a mistake. In her escalating accusations against him, she'd contradicted her original story about me. She'd claimed in court documents that she'd never known me before the shooting, forgetting she'd previously said we were casual friends. It was a small crack, but it was something. He'd hired a forensic accountant who'd found more inconsistencies. Claire had been receiving disability payments for trauma from the shooting, while simultaneously claiming she'd never been close enough to me to be traumatized by my injuries. The paperwork revealed a pattern of fraud that predated her campaign against me. We both knew exposing her meant mutual destruction. She'd prepared for this possibility, probably had contingencies we couldn't imagine. But David was past caring. He'd lost everything already. He wanted the truth out there. Consequences be damned. I thought about the life I'd built in my new city. It was small, but it was mine. Getting involved in David's war with Claire meant risking it all. But I also thought about her daughter, carrying my name, growing up in a web of lies. Maybe some battles were worth fighting after all. I told David to send me everything he had, not for revenge, but for documentation. Someday Claire's daughter would be old enough to ask questions. She deserved to know the truth about her name, about the woman who'd saved her mother's life and been erased for it. I returned to my quiet apartment and my quiet job. Claire's fiction had become the official truth, but I knew what really happened. I had the scars to prove it. And now, hidden away but safe, I had evidence that someday might matter. The chunk missing from my ear would never grow back. The scar on my cheek would never fade. But I'd survived Claire's bullets twice. First at the festival, then in the war she'd waged on my life. That survival was my victory. Small and private but real. Somewhere Claire was probably spinning new narratives, finding new victims. But I was 3 hours away, building a life she couldn't touch. It wasn't the ending anyone would choose, but it was mine. And after everything, that was enough.